I'm trying to imagine the scene, Lewis, inside Butte House.
James, just to tease you, just there you go. As you start to speak, let's be quiet now and listen to the words of Nicola Sturgeon.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming along. I'm sorry to break into your half-term break. Being First Minister of Scotland is, in my admittedly biased opinion, the very best job in the world. It is a privilege beyond measure, one that has sustained and inspired me in good times and through the toughest hours of my toughest days. I am proud to stand here as the first female and longest serving incumbent of this office. And I'm very proud of what has been achieved in the years I've been in Butte House. However, since my very first moments in the job, I have believed that part of serving well would be to know, almost instinctively, when the time is right to make way for someone else. And when that time came, to have the courage to do so, even if to many across the country and in my party, it might feel too soon. In my head and in my heart, I know that time is now, that it is right for me, for my party and for the country. And so today I am announcing my intention to step down as First Minister and leader of my party. I have asked the National Secretary of the SNP to begin the process of electing a new party leader, and I will remain in office until my successor is elected. I know there will be some across the country who feel upset by this decision and by the fact I am taking it now. Of course, for balance, there will be others who will, how should I put this, cope with the news just fine. Such is the beauty of democracy. But to those who do feel shocked, disappointed, perhaps even a bit angry with me, please know that while hard, and be in no doubt, this is really hard for me, my decision comes from a place of duty and of love. Tough love, perhaps, but love nevertheless for my party and above all for the country. Let me set out as best as I can my reasons. First, though I know it will be tempting to see it as such, this decision is not a reaction to short-term pressures. Of course, there are difficult issues confronting the government just now, but when is that ever not the case? I have spent almost 3 decades in frontline politics, a decade and a half on the top or second top rung of government. When it comes to navigating choppy waters, resolving seemingly intractable issues, or soldiering on when walking away would be the simpler option, I have plenty of experience to draw on. So if this was just a question of my ability or my resilience to get through the latest period of pressure, I wouldn't be standing here today, but it's not. This decision comes from a deeper and longer term assessment. I know it might seem sudden, but I have been wrestling with it, albeit with oscillating levels of intensity for some weeks. Essentially, I've been trying to answer 2 questions. Is carrying on right for me? And more importantly, is me carrying on right for the country, for my party, and for the independence cause I have devoted my life to? I understand why some will automatically answer yes to that second question. But in truth, I have been having to work harder in recent times to convince myself that the answer to either of them, when examined deeply, is yes. And I've reached the difficult conclusion that it's not. The questions are inextricably linked, but let me try to take them in turn. I've been First Minister for over 8 years, and I was Deputy First Minister for the best part of 8 years before that. These jobs are a privilege, but they are also rightly hard, and especially in the case of First Minister, relentlessly so. Now, to be clear, I'm not expecting violins here, but I am a human being as well as a politician. When I entered government in 2007, my niece and youngest nephew were babies just months old. As I step down, they are about to celebrate their 17th birthdays. Now that I think about it, that's exactly the age to be horrified at the thought of your auntie suddenly having more time for you. My point is this: giving absolutely everything of yourself to this job is the only way to do it. The country deserves nothing less. But in truth, that can only be done by anyone for so long. For me, it is now in danger of becoming too long. A First Minister is never off duty. Particularly in this day and age, there is virtually no privacy. Even ordinary stuff that most people take for granted, like going for a coffee with friends or for a walk on your own, becomes very difficult. And the nature and form of modern political discourse means that there is a much greater intensity, dare I say it, brutality to life as a politician than in years gone by. All in all, and actually for a long time without it being apparent, it takes its toll on you and on those around you. And if that is true in the best of times, it has been more so in recent years. Leading this country through the COVID pandemic is by far the toughest thing I've done. It may well be the toughest thing I ever do. I certainly hope so. Now, by no stretch of the imagination was my job the hardest in the country during that time. But the weight of responsibility was immense. And it's only very recently, I think, that I've started to comprehend, let alone process, the physical and mental impact of it on me. So what I'm really saying is this: if the only question was, can I battle on for another few months, then the answer is yes, of course I can. But if the question is, can I give this job everything it demands and deserves for another year, let alone for the remainder of this parliamentary term, give it every ounce of energy that it needs in the way that I have strived to do every day for the past 8 years, the answer, honestly, is different. And as that is my conclusion, hard though it has been for me to reach it, then given the nature and scale of the challenges the country faces, I have a duty to say so now. I feel that duty first and foremost to our country to ensure that it has the energy of leadership that it needs, not just today, but through the years that remain of this parliamentary term. And right now, in a very particular sense, I feel that duty to my party too. We are at a critical moment. The blocking of a referendum as the accepted constitutional route to independence is a democratic outrage. But it puts the onus on us to decide how Scottish democracy will be protected and to ensure that the will of the Scottish people prevails. My preference of using the next Westminster election as a de facto referendum is well known. I've never pretended it is perfect, no second best option ever is, nor that there are no alternatives. That is why I've always been clear that the decision must be taken by the SNP collectively, not by me alone. But I know my party well enough to understand that my view as leader would carry enormous, probably decisive weight when our conference meets next month. And I cannot, in good conscience, ask the party to choose an option based on my judgment, whilst not being convinced that I would be there as a leader to see it through. By making my decision clear now, I free the SNP to choose the path it believes to be the right one, without worrying about the perceived implications for my leadership, and in the knowledge that a new leader will steer us, I believe, successfully on that path. Now, there are two further reflections that have weighed in my decision. These, I suppose, are more about our political culture and the nature and impact of the dominance and longevity that come from success in politics. And the first, I hope my party will take heart from. One of the difficulties in coming to terms with this decision is that I am confident that I can and would lead the SNP to further electoral success. We remain by far the most trusted party in Scotland. And while for every person in Scotland who loves me, there is another who, let's say, might not be quite so enthusiastic, we are firmly on course to win the next election, while our opponents remain adrift. But the longer any leader is in office, the more opinions about them become fixed and very hard to change. and that matters. Individual polls come and go, but I am firmly of the view that there is now majority support for independence in Scotland. But that support needs to be solidified, and it needs to grow further if our independent Scotland is to have the best possible foundation. To achieve that, we must reach across the divide in Scottish politics. And my judgment now is that a new leader will be better able to do this. Someone about whom the mind of almost everyone in the country is not already made up, for better or worse. Someone who is not subject to quite the same polarised opinions, fair or unfair, as I now am. The good news, as the country will now get to see more clearly perhaps, is that the SNP is full of talented individuals, more than up to that task. My second reflection is related. I feel more and more each day now that the fixed opinions people increasingly have about me, as I say, some fair, others little more than caricature, are being used as barriers to reasoned debate in our country. Statements and decisions that should not be controversial at all quickly become so. Issues that are controversial end up almost irrationally so. Too often I see issues presented and as a result viewed not on their own merits, but through the prism of what I think and what people think about me. I've always been of the belief that no one individual should be dominant in any system for too long. But while it's easy to hold that view in the abstract, it is much harder to live by it. With this decision, I am trying to do so. Indeed, if all parties were to take this opportunity to depolarise public debate just a bit, to focus more on issues than on personalities, and to reset the tone and the tenor of our discourse, then this decision, right for me and I believe for my party and the country, might also prove to be good for our politics. I certainly live in hope. Now, a couple of final points before I take a few questions. While I am stepping down from leadership, I am not leaving politics. There are many issues I care deeply about and hope to champion in future. One of these is the Promise, the national mission so close to my heart to improve the life chances of care experienced young people and ensure they grow up nurtured and loved. My commitment to these young people will be lifelong. And obviously, there is independence. Winning independence is the cause I have dedicated a lifetime to. It is a cause I believe in with every fibre of my being. And it is a cause I am convinced is being won. I intend to be there as it is won every step of the way. Yesterday morning, I attended the funeral of a very, very dear friend and long-standing independence activist, a wonderful man by the name of Alan Angus. It was actually during that funeral service that I went from being 99% certain about this decision to 100% certain, though I know Alan would not be at all happy to have played any part in my departure, so I'm sorry, Alan. But his funeral reminded me that the cause of independence is so much bigger than any one individual, that all of us who believe in it contribute in different ways at different stages of our lives. Since I was 16, I have contributed as an activist, a campaigner, and a leader. And so now, as we look to what I firmly believe is the final stage in Scotland's journey to independence, albeit a hard one, I hope to use all the experience and perspective I've gathered over these years to help get us there. Lastly, there will be time in the days to come for me and others to reflect on what has been achieved during my time as First Minister. I'm pretty certain there will be plenty of commentary on my mistakes as well. I will have more to say before I demit office, but allow me some brief reflections now. Scotland is a changed country since 2014, and in so many ways it is changed for the better. Young people from deprived backgrounds have never had a better chance of going to university than now. Our investment to double early learning and childcare is transforming opportunities for the youngest children. It's also enabling more women to return to work. The baby box is enshrining our aspiration that every child should have the best start in life. Scotland is fairer today than it was in 2014. We have a more progressive approach to taxation and a new social security system with the Scottish Child Payment at its heart. As the Institute for Fiscal Studies confirmed last week, the poorest families with children in Scotland are now £2,000 better off as a result of our policies. For many in this cost of living crisis, that will be the difference between food on the table and a warm home or not. There are stronger protections for victims of domestic abuse, and Parliament will soon consider legislation to improve access to justice for victims of rape and sexual offences. I will be the strongest possible advocate for these reforms from the backbenches. We've also shown over these past few years what can be done with the full powers of a nation, creating institutions that are part of the transition to becoming independent. New tax and social security agencies, a network of trade hubs across the world, and a state-owned investment bank ready to help the country reap the industrial benefits of our vast renewable resources. There is so much that I am proud of, but there is always so much more to be done. I look forward to watching with pride as my successor picks up the baton. There will also be time in the days to come for me to say thank you to a very, very long list of people without whom I would not have lasted a single day in this job, let alone 8 years. I won't do so today. I might inadvertently forget someone or perhaps more likely start to cry. But there are a couple of exceptions. Firstly, my husband and family. Few people understand the price families of politicians pay for the jobs we choose to do. Mine have been my rock throughout. And of course, the SNP. Since I was 16 years old, you have been my extended family. Thank you for the honour of being your leader. And it seems to me that 8 emphatic election victories in 8 years ain't a bad record together. Finally, and above all, the people of this beautiful, talented, diverse, at times disputatious, but always wonderful country. We faced the toughest of times together. I did everything I could to guide us through that time, often from my very familiar podium in St Andrew's House. And in return, I was sustained through that period by a wave of support from you that I will remember and value for the rest of my life. So to the people of Scotland, to all of the people of Scotland, whether you voted for me or not, please know that being your First Minister has been the privilege of my life. Nothing, absolutely nothing I do in future will ever come anywhere close. Thank you from the very bottom of my heart. And with that, I will take a few questions. If you forgive me, I'm not going to do my usual and go round absolutely every journalist in the room. There will be time over the next few weeks, I'm sure, for you all to ask me questions, but I'll take a few questions for now, and I'll start with Glenn Campbell from the BBC.
First Minister, if you can't lead Scotland to independence, First Minister, if you can't lead Scotland to independence, who, if anyone, can? And what is the timetable now for your replacement? And on a slightly lighter note, do you now owe Douglas Ross £100 as a result of a bet?
I think it was 50, so if he's already inflated it to 100, we may have words there. I will let Mr Ross have the bet. My party will keep winning the elections. On your other questions, on the timetable, that's a matter for the SNP National Executive Committee. I'm sure it will set out the timetable for the election of a new SNP leader over the coming days, and I will demit office when my successor has been elected, and then, obviously subject to the will of Parliament, elected as the new First Minister. And this is a question that no matter how many times you ask it of me over the next few weeks, no matter how many inventive ways you find of asking it, I am not going to say who my preference will be to succeed me. What I do know is that the SNP is awash with talented individuals. One of the things that I've often reflected on is that when a political party, any political party in any country has very dominant individuals, others, through no fault of the dominant individual, I should say, and not sometimes for the want of trying, often others become a bit eclipsed there. So what I'm looking forward to, and I think the country will enjoy over these next few weeks, is seeing that talent and seeing the array of talent. I believe I have led this country closer to independence. I believe we are in the final phase of that journey. I think it will be hard because now we have the dual challenge, the one we always had of convincing a majority, a solid, sustainable majority of the merits of independence, but also secondly, a challenge that is new of finding, in the face of Westminster anti-democratic opposition, that democratic route to allowing the will of the Scottish people to be expressed. And I believe that my successor, I firmly believe that my successor, whoever he or she may be, will lead Scotland to independence. And I'll be there cheering him or her on every single step of the way. Conor Gillis from Skye.
Thanks, First Minister. You say that you've been wrestling with this decision for a number of weeks now, and it's not in reaction to some issues over the last couple of weeks, couple of months. Do you believe, though, that the issues, and particularly the row around transgender prisoners, was the straw that broke the camel's back here? And second of all, has it been a failure of your leadership not to have delivered independence since that was your sort of founding mission back in 2014?
I'll leave other people to be the judge of my leadership. It's probably a bit invidious beyond saying what I'm proud of, and taking this country ever closer to independence is one of those things. It's a bit invidious for me to cast that judgment. No, that issue wasn't the final straw. Look, I'm long enough in the tooth. I've been in politics, as all of you know, for a long, long time. I'm not going to stand here and insult your intelligence and say that I live in a world that is divorced from the realities of what is going on around me. But it's not the case that this decision is because of short-term issues. I've faced more short-term issues from time to time over my years in politics than I care to remember. And if it was just that, I wouldn't be standing here today. What I would say, though, is this, and I did allude to this in my remarks. I suppose when I look at some of the issues that are being hotly debated in Scotland right now, one of the things that I do regret, I suppose, is not being able to bring a more rational approach to these debates. And I think that goes back to some of what I said earlier. These debates, some of them, one in particular right now, is obviously controversial in its own right. But I think layered on to the top of that, there has been people's views about me, about independence, and suddenly debates that should be rational, and that we should be capable as a country of having rationally become something very different. I will always be a voice for inclusion, for quality, equality, for human rights and dignity. I have been, am and will always be a feminist. I will fight for women's rights, and I will stand up against threats to women's rights every day that I have breath in my body. But I'll also stand up for any stigmatised, discriminated against, marginalised and vulnerable group in society. And I believe, and call me, an optimist. Not many people call me an optimist, but I am at heart an optimist. I believe these things can and must, in any progressive, liberal, inclusive society, find ways of coexisting. And whatever role I play in politics in the future, I will always seek to do everything I can to turn that into a reality. Colin Mackay.
How have you gone from having plenty in the tank 3 weeks ago to an empty tank today? What is it that's changed over the last few weeks? You've mentioned some things. The only thing you didn't mention is the police inquiry into the party's finances.
Look, these things are not the reason I'm standing here today. These are not factors, nor will my decision today affect these things, and all of these things will take their course. I said something in my remarks that I appreciate will divide opinion in Scotland. I'm a human being, and every human being every day wrestles with a whole load of conflicting emotions. And over the last number of weeks, probably since around the turn of the year, I've been struggling with just that. I get up in the morning and I tell myself, and usually I convince myself that I've got what it takes to keep going and keep going and keep going. But then I realise that's maybe not as true. And you go through a process of just deciding where it is and that decision you're going to fall. And that's the decision I've come to today. I could go on for another few months. I don't know, 6 months, a year maybe. But I know that as time passed, I would have less and less energy to give to the job. And I can't do the job on anything other than a 100% basis. The country deserves nothing less than that. So that's the judgment I've come to. If that's my feeling, that I'm going to get in a relatively short space of time to where I am today, then I owe it to the country to say it now, so that that new leadership can be in place. And as I said, in relation to my party, I don't want to stand at a special conference, a month or so from now, and ask my party to take my judgment, opt for a path, knowing that I have doubts about my ability to see it through as leader. This is a better thing to do today for me, for my party, and I believe for the country too. James Cook.
Thank you. First Minister, I think it's fair to say that the NHS is in a really serious situation. The attainment gap between rich and poor pupils, which you'd said was one of your core missions as First Minister, remains pretty wide. And despite what you're saying today, polls suggest that you've got nowhere near creating a sustained majority for independence. Do you have regrets about one or any of those issues?
Oh, again, James, I'm a human being. I don't know if you've got regrets about things in your life. Of course, I've got regrets about all sorts of things in my life. And as I reflect on my time as First Minister, there'll be things I am hugely proud of and things that I regret. And if I had my time again, I might do differently. And forgive me, there'll be plenty of time for me to do that. I'm sure there'll be plenty of time for you to do that, and I'm sure you will. So, yeah, but I'm proud of my time as First Minister. But I'm also proud that I know when it's time to move on and to pass on to someone else. The country, the cause I believe in, my party, everything is bigger than any politician, no matter who they are and no matter how dominant they've been for no matter how much time. Politicians come and go all the time. The country is what matters, and the future of the country is what matters. I'm proud of the part I have played and hope to continue to play in a different capacity in building the future of this country. But I think in terms of leadership, it's time for someone else. I think the easier sometimes thing to do, and the thing that traditionally politicians tend to do, is just to cling on and on and on and on and on until everybody is sort of pushing for you to go. It's harder because there's always reasons not to. Yeah, if I stay a bit longer, I can do this. If I stay a bit longer, something might happen. It's always easier to find the reasons not to make a decision. I think it's better to make the decision when you know in your heart that it's the right one for you and for your country. I'm not sure I want to say this sentence, actually. I will be 53 this year. I entered Parliament, when I was, 29. I've been in government since I was 37. I have literally done this in one capacity or another for all of my life. I've been Nicola Sturgeon, the politician, for all of my life. It's been a privilege. I have done things, met people, gone places, had experiences that I would never have done. I have a depth of gratitude to the party that I lead, to the country that I serve, that I can never find the words to express. But having reached this stage in my life, maybe I want to spend a bit of time on Nicola Sturgeon, the person, the human being, and contribute differently. And does that sound in some ways selfish? I hope it doesn't, because I have given and will, in whatever way I can, continue to give everything I can in service to this country. But I need for me, and I think it's right for the country, to do that in a different way in future. And that is what I'm seeking to do. And the more I talk, the more convinced I am that this is the right decision for me. I'll take Louise Scott from ITV. I'm going to end up doing what I said I wouldn't do. I'm not going to do that. Louise.
First Minister, we've heard rumblings of divisions within the party in recent weeks, particularly around certain issues. Ultimately, did you lose trust in your leadership from certain key members of your party?
I think you'd have to ask individuals to give their views on my leadership. I think any objective analysis would suggest that that's not true. I enjoy the risk of sounding immodest here, which, as you know, I never like to do. But I, even in times that would be described, have been described by most of you as tough, I enjoy approval ratings after 8 years in government that most leaders would give their right arm for. So, yes, of course, the longer any leader is in office, the more people will find things to disagree with you on, because nobody agrees with any other person 100%. And that concept of, that whole idea of longevity in politics, the longer you lead, the more, you will find issues that people find it hard to agree with you on. But, I believe I could, if it was just about, can I lead this country forward, certainly the party to electoral success, the answer is yes. But it is much deeper than that, which is what I've been trying to give a sense of today. Who will we have next? Kieran Jenkins.
First Minister, you said, judge me on my record, didn't you? You remember saying that in the context of the education attainment gap between the best and the worst off pupils. Now is surely the time to do that. Do you think you failed those young people?
No, I don't.
You made a promise, you didn't deliver it. The NHS is in a pretty perilous state. Drugs deaths have been catastrophic. When you look back, do you wish it were different, that you could have been more successful in those areas in which you have had complete or considerable control?
Well, I'll refer back to a question one of your colleagues asked me about, anybody taking stock of the things they're proud of, the things they wish they could turn the clock back and do differently, and I'll do that. And you use the terms judge me. One thing I can be absolutely certain of is people will judge me. There's been no shortage of judgments on me and what I've done or not done in office, and I'm pretty certain that will continue. But if you take young people, today, and I remember, possibly including by you, but certainly by plenty in this room, being challenged on this when I became First Minister, about the attainment gap in access to university. Today, we're on track to close that. If you're a young person from a deprived background or a background like the one I come from, you've got a better chance than you've ever had before of going to university. At the other end of the education system, that fundamental investment in expansion, doubling early years childcare and education is transformational. Effects won't be seen immediately, but the effects that will have as children go through the school system are considerable. The NHS everywhere, health services are under pressure. This country is the only one in the UK that has not faced industrial action in our health service because of our approach to working with those in the service together in partnership to tackle these challenges, and that will continue. So on a whole range of these things, I'll have plenty of time to reflect at greater length, and I'm pretty certain all of you will reflect at length. But one thing is for sure, there will be no shortage of judgment on me and my time as First Minister. Right, we're going to take a couple more, and Alan Smith from Bauer is the next one.
Thank you, First Minister. You spoke about this has been something you've been thinking about a matter of weeks and not in response to short-term pressures, but at what point did you start to consider it? Was there a particular moment that was weeks ago, and who did you have conversations with at that time about whether or not this is the right decision to take?
I've been thinking about it. I used the term in my remarks with oscillating intensity, and that's true. There are some days, I wouldn't have thought about it at all because, frankly, too much else, and then other times it's weighed more heavily. I don't know, possibly a couple of weeks ago it just started to crystallise a bit more, but it inevitably, again, here's the human thing, it always takes you a bit of time, I think, between the point where probably deep down inside you've made a decision and being able to actually admit that to yourself before you even start telling other people. So I couldn't pinpoint the exact moment, except that sitting in the funeral service for Alan yesterday, surrounded by SNP members, mourning somebody that 89 years old had campaigned all his life for independence, it did have that clarifying effect that stepping down as leader doesn't mean I stop contributing to the cause of independence. It doesn't mean you stop making a contribution. Everybody has their time, and I think in leadership one of the hardest but one of the most important things to do is know when that time is up. In terms of who I talked about, obviously my close family, the small number of friends. One of the things in leadership you really, really do learn is who your true friends are in life. And, so if you're one of the small number who, mainly because I wouldn't have been able to tell you without crying over the last 24 hours, I didn't phone but texted this morning just before the news broke, know you're one of those friends. And thank you for all your support. And Neil Pooran from PA.
Thanks, First Minister. First of all, can you just confirm if you'll be staying on as an MSP and what kind of issues you'll be campaigning on as an MSP? And also, will the cooperation agreement with the Scottish Green Party need to be renegotiated now if you as First Minister are no longer in that role?
The cooperation agreement stands. I'm not going to try to dictate anything or at this stage, certainly not now and hopefully not ever, start to issue unsolicited advice to my successor. I know from experience that's not always something that is welcome. Don't report that bit. But, I think the cooperation agreement with the Greens has been a thoroughly good thing for the government, for the country, and I would hope to see that continue. Your first question, which yes, I do intend to remain in Parliament. I hope to stay in Parliament I intend to stay in Parliament till certainly the next election, and like all MSPs, take a decision about beyond that nearer the time of the next election. The other body or people, I suppose, that I want to thank and was hesitant in doing it today in case I started to cry are my constituents who have supported me through thick and thin, put their trust in me time and again. My constituency party, what was Glasgow Govan, now Glasgow South Side, that have literally been by my side since 1995, and I look forward to continuing to serve my constituency to the best of my ability. I've given some indication of the kind of issues I'll want to be a voice on. There's some very important reform to the criminal justice system coming forward, I know, around improving access to justice for victims of sexual offences. They'll be controversial. Maybe they could be one of the first tests of a more depolarised political debate, but I will be the strongest, most strenuous advocate for these reforms. Young people, care-experienced young people, I certainly will continue to champion that cause. It's one that got under my skin and into my heart in a way that few other issues did over my time as First Minister. Beyond that, we will see. I'm looking forward to new opportunities, new challenges, and just a new way of living life. And perhaps, and above all else, that's what I'm most looking forward to, just a different way of living life, catching up with the people, the friends that I've not had much opportunity to spend time with. But watch this space, there's plenty more to come. Right, with that, I'm going to depart.
Just one factual point. Have you been, or do you expect to be interviewed by the police who are looking into your party's finances?
I'm not going to discuss an ongoing police investigation. I wouldn't do that on any issue, and I'm not going to do it now. Thank you.
So there we have it. Nicola Sturgeon announcing her resignation in a speech and speaking to journalists afterwards, taking quite a few questions there from journalists, even though she said she wasn't going to do that. She described it as the best job in the world, a privilege beyond measure, and she said she was very proud of what she'd achieved. We did learn a couple of new details, and that is that she will stay on in the role until her successor is chosen. Who that successor will be, we of course don't know. She was asked who she would prefer in a roundabout way, and she said she will not be declaring who she prefers, deferring instead to the statement that there is plenty of talent within the SNP to choose from, and she's excited about that and to see that come forward. Why has she decided to resign? Well, she said, first of all, this wasn't a reaction to short-term political events. Some speculation about that. She said, I am a human being at one point, and saying she doesn't expect any violins, but that it is a tough job. And she was being honest with herself and saying it's not one that she felt she could fully commit to. James Shaw is our correspondent standing by. So, James, we knew a couple of hours ago that this was going to happen, and we got some more details from Nicola Sturgeon there. What stood out for you?
Yes, I think we understand a whole lot more now about why Nicola Sturgeon is resigning and why she is doing it now. And she did give a very strong sense that she just felt that the pressures of the job were weighing more heavily on her than they had before. She talked about the fact that her mind started to change in the new year after Christmas. She was oscillating, she said, between thinking that she could carry on with the job and that she wanted to give it up. But what was really fascinating, Lewis, was that she talked about the funeral of an SNP activist, which happened at the weekend. And she said that it was thinking then at that event about her future that really crystallised it for her. So it may be from those hints that she gave that she had decided in principle that she wanted to leave, but it was actually the way she felt over the weekend that made her decide that she actually had to make the move, because as we know, no one was expecting this. No one was expecting until this morning that there was going to be a news conference with Nicola Sturgeon, let alone that she was going to announce that she was resigning. And I think the other really significant thing that she talked about was the contribution that she has made in terms of the SNP's goal of achieving independence and whether she could carry on doing that. She talked about the fact that her policy now, since the UK government has refused permission for an independence, her policy is a de facto referendum using the next general election as a chance for people to vote on whether they want independence or not. She's aware that there is opposition to that, and so she said that if she stepped aside, that would enable her party to make a fresh decision about
James,
what the best way is to cope with that.
James, I'm sorry to interrupt. Please do stay there.